everyone. I'm Kristen Hawkins, I'm President of Students for Life, of American Students for Life Action. This is actually a live episode of my Explicitly Pro-Life podcast that we thought, instead of just putting it on the podcast platforms, and by the way, you should be subscribing to Explicitly Pro-Life. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. We also wanted to bring it live today because we have some very exciting polling data, abortion polling data that Students for Life just commissioned that we want to share with the world, and especially you all who support Students for Life and the pro-life activists across the country, saving lives and serving women. So the first question we have to address is, why do we need to do polling? We know what the truth is with abortion. It's very, very important for us as a movement to kind of have our finger on the pulse of what this generation and what Americans believe about abortion, how they feel about the terms that are being used, phrases that come up, especially in the political debates and discussions in our country. And it's especially important for us at Students for Life when we think about this generation, Gen Z and Gen Y, and how they're being targeted by the abortion industry, and to know how deep have the lies and the deceit of the abortion lobby kind of gone into the minds of this generation. What do we need to unpack for this generation? What ways do we need to educate them about the truth, the violent reality of abortion, how abortion harms women? And so, one thing that we often hear from the news media that's kind of alluded to from those on the political left is that, this generation, Gen Z and Gen Y, they're totally fine with Roe versus Wade, with the status of abortion in our country. And that's actually not true. This generation, which is 1/3 of our electorate, and this is a key point for us, especially when you're talking with politicians and political leaders about why they need to care about what young people think and know about abortion. 1/3 this electorate, we're often kind of told that are okay with our abortion status quo of Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton, which together allow for abortion in all 9 months for any reason. Not saying that in your state abortion is available in all 9 months. But in some states it is, and Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton allow for that reality, that very gruesome reality. And so it's important for us to kind of unpack what this generation, those future voters, those new voters think about abortion policy in the United States. Where do we need to go to educate them about the abortion industry? How do we effectively change hearts and change minds on this issue? So every year for the past 3 or 4 years, Students for Life of America's Dimitri Institute for Pro-Life Advancement commissions a poll in January, before the media starts talking about abortion for the annual pro-life march and the National Pro-Life Summit. We commission a poll, put it out there in the field, asking young people what they think about abortion, what do they know about abortion and our abortion laws. Hans is the founder of Vinea Research. He oversaw this research project for us. Vinea Research was founded in 2013, largely to serve social advocacy and faith-based organizations. Hans has a professional market research company, and actually came from industry leading companies working with groups like Pfizer, Medtronic, and Genentech. He's been working with Students for Life for a few years on a number of projects, actually. Some of them you've heard about, some of them you haven't heard about yet, to really understand the mindset of this generation when it comes to abortion, the leading human rights issue of our day. So, Hans, I'm really excited to have you on today. The other guest we have on is Kristi Hamrick, and you all have probably seen Kristi in other episodes of Explicitly Pro-Life or other webcasts we've done. She serves as the Chief Media and Policy Strategist with Students for Life America and Students for Life Action. She worked to draft a lot of the polling and research that Hans then commissioned and put out into the field. And she is by far, I would say, the leading pro-life expert in all things chemical abortion policy in our country. If you ever want to have a conversation with Kristi, just say the word chemical abortion, stop there, and she will fill in all the blanks. But Kristi lives lives, eats, and breathes these abortion policies, what's happening in the news media, how they're covering abortion. And so I definitely wanted to have her on this episode today because I don't think you can find anyone more passionate. She and I both have the same Myers-Briggs. There we go. Yeah, Myers-Briggs score. So if you can imagine the two of us in a room, it's a lot of fun.
It's all go, go, go.
I think it's a lot of fun, Kristi. I don't know other people may not think it's fun. So all right. So before we get to Kristi and you utter the magic phrase chemical abortion, which we have to talk about because this poll, I think, was one of the first ever to really dig into chemical abortion, which we all know, and I've been talking a lot about in the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. It is the next wave of the abortion industry, and they've already enacted their post-Roe plans, which is chemical abortion, chemical abortion, chemical abortion. So we have to be talking about that. So Hans, I want to ask you first. We've been doing this research for a number of years. This was the first year your all's team at Vinea had taken the lead on this type of project. What surprised you most from the results of the hundreds of young people that you all interviewed?
Sure. So there's a general perception or stereotype that the younger generations are much more liberal and along with that, much more pro-choice. And so, but the other thought was, well, I'm not sure how important a topic this is for them. But when we asked the question about whether or not they want to or should have the ability to vote on abortion in their state, I was really surprised to see that 80% of the Gen Zs and Millennials agreed with that statement or did want that particular right, indicating that it's really important to them and they want to vote on it at the state level.
And yeah, I mean, that is huge because especially when you're thinking about as we as pro-life advocates, and I realize there's some pro-choice people probably watching and tuning in, but really this Explicitly Pro-Life is for the pro-life movement. When we're talking with politicians and legislators in our state houses, this is a very important point that the news media and the abortion lobby likes to use this majority of people love Roe, and then we prove every single time that they say they like Roe, and then you tell them what Roe is, and then they don't like Roe. They just don't know Roe. But then we started asking this question of what do you think about you actually having a right to vote on the abortion policy in your state? And every time we ask this question, Hans, it's significant. I mean, 8 out of 10 of the largest portion of our electorate say that they want a voice and a vote on abortion policy. I mean, every politician needs to hear that, especially as we're having these conversations about why the Supreme Court should reverse Roe and send the decision back to the states.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what's interesting is I looked a little bit under the hood of the data, and you see that the pro-life sentiment is a little bit stronger in the Gen Z population than the millennial population, which again is encouraging for the pro-life movement, that the younger generation, again, contrary to a lot of what's put out there, is really trending more pro-life than their older, younger counterparts.
So the millennials, I'm sadly one of them. I'm an older millennial though, so we're worse than the Gen Zers.
Just a little bit.
Okay, just a little bit. Okay. Well, there's hope there. Okay. What else? Was there anything else that stuck out to you? I mean, this poll, I guess, to back up, and maybe I should have gone over, how many people did we interview? And then were they majority Republican and conservatives?
So about 911, a little bit over 900 were surveyed. And when you look at, so this population tended to be a little bit left of center. Compared to last year's poll, which tended to be a little bit right of center. And so one of the questions that I had going in then when I was getting ready to look at the results was, over time you've seen trends that the younger generation is becoming increasingly pro-life. Would we still see that here, even though, the population shifted a little bit, or at least the sampling of it did? And even though we were a little bit slightly left of center, the pro-life trends continued, right? So more people are pro, exactly, in terms of.
So that means my polling numbers would have been better if we would have polled the same demographic we polled last year that tended to be, seemed more right. That's a very good sign. I think sometimes when I speak with supporters or I'm giving a speech in front of older folks who aren't millennials or Gen Z, and I'll say, we're the pro-life generation, and there's a lot of like doubting Thomases, and they're like, no, how can this be? They're so liberal. They're, doing all of these things, and they vote for all these people that I hate. But it really is even. And we talk about why that is. It's because they see abortion as fundamentally a human rights issue. I do think it's interesting too. You brought up with the voice in the vote, them having one vote. We've actually saw an increase this year. So like from last year when we did the panel skewed more right. This year's panel skewed more left. Even with that, we saw an increase of the young people saying they wanted a vote on abortion policy in their state. I mean,
Correct.
That's
across the board, regardless of your point of view on abortion, they all want it. I mean, 80%. That's
crazy. All right, so let's go through some other the big picture kind of findings. So 8 out of 10 wanted a vote on abortion policy. That's up from 66%, last year. Interesting. It said, I think one of the top line results you all found was 3 out of 4 wanted more limits with abortion.
Correct. And so it's not just, the extreme positions were ban abortion, not extreme, right? But the on the spectrum, right? On the one extreme, you had people who said no abortion, no matter what. And on the other hand, it's abortion whenever and for whatever reason. But then the nuance is in the middle, right? When you consider, well, what about in this case, like, an exception? I would support abortion if there were an exception for, danger to the life of the mother, rape, incest.
4 out of 10 said they favored no abortion at all or abortion only in cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of a mother. 4 out of 10.
Correct.
Okay. Another key point I saw that was interesting, and I'm always thinking about, trying to convince political leaders to actually do and fulfill their promises. I thought, we got to get this up to Capitol Hill. 54% said they supported common sense Hyde Amendment protections on legislation, meaning no taxpayer funding of abortions. And that's something that's common sense, but sadly, the Democratic National Committee actually is now opposed to that. That's like not even in their platform. Their platform calls for taxpayer funded abortions, and all of these pieces of legislation that we're seeing being introduced in the Democrat controlled House of Representatives now don't even include the Hyde Amendment, which, historically, even Barack Obama was supported the Hyde Amendment. Even, Senator Joe Biden, spoke openly his support for the Hyde Amendment before he wanted to run for president, needed Planned Parenthood's money. So I think that's a significant thing. The other thing, Hans, I don't know if you've ever done research on this, but I thought it was very interesting was heartbeat and how much a heartbeat matters, because there's a lot of talk about, obviously the Texas heartbeat law, which is saving 138 lives every single day. Thank God. 52% said that after a baby's heartbeat is detected, they wanted no abortion at all, or only exceptions made for rape, incest, or to save the mother's life. That was actually an increase from the previous year, which was 47% with the more right-leaning panel, which I thought was significant because you've had a lot of very negative press about, coming out from the left and, all of their worries and, their sex strikes and all this thing, like women have no rights in Texas because they can't kill their children after the children have a heartbeat. But you saw actually an increase in support for that. Did that take you aback when you saw that?
A little bit, because we've done messaging research where we try to look at this heartbeat issue and how do you message to it, and it's hard to message to it. But if you just present this statement in a simple way and you ask them for their opinion on it, they're like, yeah, you know what? When there is a heartbeat, that's a tough point because you're introducing humanity to it, of course. I will say that it's almost like a qualitative assessment, right? It's like saying it's like comparing when does a baby have a heart versus at 20 weeks, at 15 weeks, at 10 weeks, right? In terms of a quantitative assessment. I think about a third of the sample didn't know, because we asked, when does the heart begin to beat? And they don't know, or they think it happens later than it does. And so it's nice to have this more qualitative assessment of the heartbeat, right? That speaks to humanity, because humanity is actually kind of hard to quantify outside of something like conception, right? Which is like a specific point in time. Everything else is more qualitative. And so I think the heart speaks to the heart, right? And so that's certainly something that will move people's minds, change people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I mean, this is why I've been very supportive recently of, and Students for Life Action, our C4 501c4 sister organization. We've been, lobbying for passage of heartbeat bills in states, because I think it's a not only can these bills, if they're enacted, like in Texas, save a very large percentage of children, much higher than, for example, like a 15-week abortion ban, which will only save, a few hundred, depending on the state. I mean, it's a very small percentage of abortions are committed at 15 weeks or beyond. So you save a much larger numbers of children, but it also, the discussion around the heartbeat legislation is a remarkable educational tool. I think very much like the partial birth abortion debate our country had, where it really showed the gruesomeness of the abortion, where the heartbeat legislation educates every single person about when a child's heart begins to beat. I mean, that's why the abortion lobby is trying to call it fetal cardiac pole activity now. They don't even want to use the word heartbeat because they know, if we show everyone in America the humanity of the child, they instantly begin to lose. One more question, one more finding and kind of feedback from you that I thought was interesting was we asked millennials and Gen Z how they felt about Roe. We always ask this question, do you support Roe versus Wade? It was about dead heat. 50% said support, 50% said they oppose. But then in one line, we said, did you know Roe versus Wade in its companion case, Doe versus Bowen, allows for abortion all 9 months for whatever reason, sometimes with taxpayer funding? Re-asked the exact same dang question and instantly saw a 10% shift to the pro-life movement, where you had then 60% of this more left-leaning panel of young people. Well, the third of our electorate, I'll just keep saying that over and over again. Kristi's getting so happy because I'm getting that in there. But a third of the electorate, they all like Roe. Well, I mean, that's a counter to like everything we're hearing from the mainstream media. Was that a surprise to you when you saw that?
Right. So I think the numbers were 60% support Roe at the moment, 40% oppose. And then that 40%, the 40% jumped to 50%. Okay. Once you actually showed them a little bit of information. And I don't think that was surprising at all to me, just because one observation here and one observation in other research we do in this area is when you start informing people, when you start educating them on whatever it is that you're asking about, right? So in this case, Roe v. Wade, minds start to change, right? So what we did is we asked, first of all, where do you stand on Roe v. Wade? Do you support or oppose it? Then we asked them, okay, well, now do you support or oppose the components of Roe v. Wade? And that's when we got into, the mother changing her mind because of she thought the baby might have same-sex attraction or had transgender tendencies or didn't like the sex of the baby. That kind of thing. Minds change, right? So 2/3 of people actually didn't, oppose abortion for sex selection, basically, or because of, not wanting a baby that was same-sex attracted and things like that, which 2/3 is a pretty significant number. And so, again, we're educating them on Roe v. Wade. Almost 6 in 10 oppose the part of it where Roe v. Wade allows abortion all 9 months of the pregnancy. And so when you start to just really simply educate them, it starts to change perspectives. And this is where especially you see a little bit more movement with the Gen Z population.
Do you have those stats? I don't have them offhand. Can you go through those stats? I'm going off script here. I don't have it in my notes, but do you have the stats where we asked individually, do you oppose abortion if the child is I think we said same-sex attracted or gay? Do you oppose abortion if the child has Down syndrome? We asked like very specific.
We did. And I
think that was a pretty educational moment, because even if they would say, I actually think about, can we actually change the minds of those who take the poll after they take the poll? Because they had to then put on paper that they were okay with or I guess the computer, because they were doing this poll on the computer, but they had to like select the button that they were okay with discrimination. Like, I wonder how that's set up.
Right. Yeah. So if knowing that Roe v. Wade allows abortions to be performed if the mother doesn't like the sex of the baby, that's the 67% that I mentioned before, 2/3.
Okay.
Abortions committed if the mother fears that her child might be same-sex attracted or transgendered, 66%. Pretty significant.
66 to support abortion?
Opposed abortion. Yeah. When you point out that it ends at the disproportionate number of minority lives, that's also 60%, right? So pretty significant. And then I mentioned the 9-month that allows abortions to be performed all 9 months of pregnancy. Up until the moment of birth, 58% oppose it in that circumstance.
I mean, that's great to see that. I mean, that's pretty sweeping. And in terms of like political polling, that's very good to see. Obviously, I wonder like who the hell these other 40% of people are. We have to talk to them urgently.
Yeah.
But that's a very good number, especially when you think about how fundamentally different the worldview, the political opinions of this generation are, especially Gen Z, when it comes to other issues. But I think that I just think about the people that took that poll who then we're doing the poll and we're like, oh my gosh, abortion is discriminatory. It is discriminating against certain human beings. Kristi, I want to bring you in. Before I bring you in, if you all want to see the actual one-pager, the write-up of the poll, you can go to instituteforprolifeadvancement.com. It's right there. It's like the last white paper we have done. So you can kind of see and get in all the weeds from what Hans and his team at Vinea did with all of the analysis. So instituteforprolifeadvancement.com. So Kristi, let's bring you into this discussion. I know you're itching. Let's talk about chemical abortion.
Exactly.
That you're like, yes. We added in a ton of questions. Like I said, I think this is one of the first kind of national polls to ask so many detailed questions with those directly targeted by the abortion industry on chemical abortion. Can you go over some of your best, takeaways that you read and were very excited about or concerned about?
Exactly. Well, to put this all in context, we all know that the Dobbs v. Jackson case before the Supreme Court has the potential to either overturn Roe or to radically change the legal framework in which abortion operates in the U.S. Because as we've talked about, Roe and Doe allow abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. And we're even debating things like infanticide and born alive bills, which is ridiculous because if you're not opposed to infanticide, I don't know what bothers you.
I know.
So we look at this.
I don't want you around my children ever.
I know. What I have a real concern for your moral code. But what the corporate abortion has done in light of changes that we know are coming is they started agitating for a drop in all health and safety standards related to chemical abortion pills. And a lot of people don't know that right now, 54% of all abortions are committed with chemical abortion pills by 9 weeks. They're more than 40% of abortions overall. They want to drug your baby to death, basically. And what they have pivoted to as a business model is death by mail. No test, online distribution of chemical abortion pills. And why that matters is this. These pills can cause women injury, infertility, and death. And I just have to say that again. Chemical abortion pills, these pills kill. They can cause women injury, infertility, and death.
Memorize that line.
Exactly. And the main reasons why is because if you are later in pregnancy, or if you have an ectopic pregnancy where the pregnancy went, for example, in a fallopian tube and not your womb, and you take these pills, you can die. If you are Rh negative, and 15% of women in America are, including me, when there's an exchange of blood in pregnancy, by birth, by miscarriage, or by abortion, a woman needs to be treated in about 24 hours with a shot called Rogam, or antibodies will form that will attack a future baby. I've had tons of these shots and 4 children, and very happy to have them, both the shots and the children. But that's how you preserve your fertility. So chemical abortion, they don't want to deal with any of that. They don't care if you're infertile. And in fact, the corporate abortion published a whole paper, a whole study saying, well, we don't have to test for Rh negative status because nobody makes us. And maybe women want to be sterilized, which I find the most ridiculous statement ever. But what we did in our poll, which is groundbreaking, and I want to stop and give Kristen full credit for this. Students for Life started identifying chemical abortion as the front lines of the abortion wars in California, where they were working for 3 different sessions to get chemical abortion pills distributed online and on campuses. We fought that. And they said at the time that they were going to roll chemical abortion out as a beta test across the country, and we have been ready. But we've been writing about it, talking about it, researching it. And so again, Students for Life really is the first to identify this in polling as the forefront of where it's going. And just to let you know the kind of people that Joe Biden has surrounded himself with, his head of HHS, Health and Human Services, is an attorney who has sued healthcare providers to force them to drop health and safety standards. The guy that he has nominated, Dr. Robert Califf, to head the FDA, where we're supposed to have safety, oversaw a reduced health and safety standards the last time he got there. So I guess it's okay if women die because, well, someone's going to die. So if it's the baby and the woman, well, whatever, death is our business. It's shocking, the people who are in charge. So what we wanted to do in the poll is really break out a reaction of people to the separate harms of abortion, of chemical abortion pills. So we found that more than 6 in 10 oppose no test online distribution of chemical abortion pills. And that's really important.
Which is really important because the FDA just basically is now allowing that as of December, 21st?
Yes, as of middle of December, they are allowing no test online distribution without any health and safety standards online. And here's the thing. So they say, well, it's not that big a deal because not that many women will die. But last I checked, a lot more of us are wearing masks than are going to die of COVID. Last I checked, a lot more of us use seatbelts than are ever going to die in a traffic accident. So the FDA's sudden disinterest in health and safety, if not a lot of people will die, is A, ridiculous, and B, not even accurate because they're not tracking the data. So more than 6 in 10, they oppose this no test online distribution. More than 6 in 10 supported requirements for screening for blood type and treating Rh negative women so that they wouldn't be sterilized. 53% opposed selling chemical abortions without exam, and 62% supported follow-up exams. Because the thing is, and that means that equals an ultrasound. I mean, many of us have had an ultrasound. It's no big deal. So it's an ultrasound before to see where's the baby implanted and how far along are you in pregnancy, and an ultrasound after to see are there human remains still inside, because sepsis and infection is a cause of death. It's crazy. We found even 6 in 10 supported adult engagement laws because we shouldn't abandon a minor girl to the care of her sexual abuser and an abortion sales team.
Which I actually found, just stop you there, I found that to be significant because you're thinking about, this wasn't just a poll of like old people or, you know, old people like Kristen, who's 36 and has kids. This was a poll of young people who are, 18, 20 years old, who are in college, who are those most targeted by the abortion industry. I found that really interesting because I thought that number would be a lot lower in support because they, a lot of these young people had been there at one point.
Exactly. What's really funny is even if you're for abortion, and none of us on this call are, that's not an argument for selling chemical abortion pills in this way. And that's what's so offensive about the fact that our so-called healthcare system, HHS, FDA, and Joe Biden, who's picking these people, are going to push these pills in ways that kill people. And let's look, another thing I thought was interesting, and we polled on this point for a couple of years, Kristen, is the fact that this is the sex trafficker and sexual abuser's drug of choice. Yeah. There's plenty of anecdotal stories out there of the guy that got the pills, slipped them in his girlfriend's food, or gave them to a child who he was molesting. 65% support in-person legislation, in-person distribution of the pills to ensure that a girl is not being coerced and that it's not a 50-year-old abuser who goes online and says, I'm an 18-year-old girl, and then takes those drugs and gives them to somebody, because there's no guidelines here. You can go online and lie and get these pills and hand them out, and don't think people don't know that already. It's crazy. And one of the 8 in 10 who wanted to vote on abortion policy was a huge number for us. But this next one was great, where you had About 7 in 10 millennials and Gen Z, 1/3 of the electorate, as Kristen said, one of my new favorite numbers, say that they would support politicians who defend health and safety standards, which is great because right now, Students for Life Action has legislation doing just that all over the country.
Yeah,
So
that's
I mean, this is coming
this
to a
is
state
this
near
is
you.
another one of those talking points to go to politicians. I mean, we talk about the real nature of politics. Even if you've got great leaders who've defended life and spoken out against abortion in the campaign or the debate stage, it doesn't mean they're going to do jack when they get into office, because no politician does anything unless pushed and shoved there. And so I mean,
right.
that this poll is these are some perfect talking points for you all to know when you're going to meet with these legislators of like, this is a winning issue. Yes, you're going to get flack when you take up a bill, introduce a bill, vote for a bill that bans the sale and distribution or the online sale, at the very least, the online sale of chemical abortion in your state. But this is actually a winning issue, contrary to what the mainstream media wants you to believe. And so use this. Like, don't just absorb this and be like, oh, yay, I'm on the right side. And the trends, like, yes, make it feel good about yourself, but use this polling information. The reason we're giving it out freely and we're marketing it, we're doing this live episode of Explicitly Pro-Life Podcast is because I guess enough of you don't subscribe to my podcast in the first place. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. But second, use this in your advocacy to help us get further down the line to where we want to be in the pro-life movement and where our goal is, which is abortion unavailable, unthinkable, protection at conception. Hans, let's bring you into this because I could hear Kristi talk all day about chemical abortion. It's fascinating and extremely important. But Hans, did you take away any findings on chemical abortion, or did something kind of stick out to you that you didn't know you thought was interesting?
That last data point that Kristi mentioned, that nearly 70% are more likely to vote for a candidate who supports requiring in-person care and testing before and after the abortion pill was a bit shocking and surprising. I didn't expect it to be that high. I expected the majority to maybe feel that way, given what I'd seen before. But then that was pretty significant because
that's pro-choice people too. Those are if 50% of the poll said they supported Roe, 50% didn't support Roe after they found out what Roe is. That means you have 20% of people who still support Roe versus Wade coming over and saying, but we think that there should be in-person medical care and testing before and after these dangerous pills are administered.
These are pro-choice people. They lean slightly left, and this was a pretty impressive number and statistic. Mm-hmm. But it's consistent with what we saw in the Roe v. Wade part of the survey, right? When you provide some education, when you ask them, or show them some information, you're informing them, and they're making more informed decisions, and therefore landing on the right side, as it were.
One of the things I thought was interesting, Kristen, is we all see these Hollywood stars and singers play out their lives in the public sphere, and they shout their abortion and they talk about it. And then what's interesting is then 5-10 years later, then they're doing all this media on the infertility treatments that they're receiving or their struggle with miscarriages. And I asked directly to our audience, women need to understand that you are damaging your ability to have kids through the way that abortion is done in America. Are you Rh negative and you're finding that you're having a lot of miscarriages? That's a serious problem. And then there's the fact that abortion really can damage your body and lead to preterm birth, which is the #1 cause of infant death in the US and around the world. And they don't say that. And what's really interesting is we pretend that abortion is a simple thing to do to a woman's body, interrupting this natural, beautiful thing without consequences. And what is true is there are consequences. And we don't talk about that. And frankly, chemical abortion creates some of the worst problems. But the damage to a woman's body through surgical abortion, severe, and it's undiscussed.
Yeah, I found that to me, if we're going around the table talking about what we found interesting in the findings, that to me was so interesting was that question about infertility was the highest of, when you understand and even these pro-choice Roe versus Wade supporting young people, liberal-leaning young people will say, yeah, there's something wrong if this is a drug that can harm your future infertility. And you're absolutely right, Kristi. I mean, every week there's an Entertainment Weekly or whatever those insider Hollywood shows talking about an actress who dealt with miscarriage or infertility. And there's never this question of why. Why is there these epidemic levels of infertility in our country? Well, you have epidemic levels of STD infections in our country, chlamydia, which leads to infection in the uterus and leads to infertility. You have abortion. And like, we don't have these, backup conversations. I often hear from left activists on campuses. Well, if you're so pro-life, you would support more healthcare spending and basically free, socialized, crappy healthcare for all, because women, especially Black women, they have high rates of preterm birth and complications with their birth, complications with their child. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah. Absolutely, we need to have a serious conversation about that. But let's back it up. Why do we see these huge levels of preterm birth? Why are we seeing these miscarriage and infertility rates? And no one wants to actually address the problem. But the reality is your decisions, your actions you take always have consequences. And these are consequences of sex with multiple partners, sex with not in a committed relationship when you're not ready to procreate, and abortion. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's the reality. I'm being a little bit of a mom. I'll stop talking. I have a 13-year-old. He gets to hear all this stuff all the time now from me. So, one thing I definitely want to hit on, if you want this information, we want you to have it, we want you to take it and use it, go to the Institute for Pro-Life Advancement. I think it's .com.org. Hopefully, dear God, I hope it's both. I hope we own both. I think we do. But you can get the white paper where it has all of the breakdown that Kristi and Hans have kind of gone through in detail. Use it in your ministry, use it in your advocacy, your lobbying work. Go to studentsforlifeaction.org, sign up to volunteer with our C4 educational organization, because we are trying to work with state legislators in every state. We have a 50-state plan. We don't talk about it enough, but we are having conversations with legislators in state houses across the country as we prepare for a post-Roe America. And the conversation is about chemical abortion. How do we protect women from this predatory abortion industry? How do we protect all lives from conception and pass laws? So, sign up to volunteer with Students for Life Action. You never know when you're going to get an email or text message from us telling us to go to State House. Get ready. It's coming, especially in June. Right now, we're working with more than 20 states to get laws introduced and passed and signed into law this legislative session. So make sure you do that as well. And make sure you follow the Students for Life of America, studentsforlife.org, our blog. We're constantly talking about chemical abortions, what's happening on campuses, and we'll be talking more about additional research that our Institute for Pro-Life Advancement will be putting out there. Also, check out the new studentsforlife.org's website. We have a beautiful, beautiful map that may have caused my staff to have like a lot of gray hair in December, but it's gorgeous. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But thank you guys for tuning in today to this live episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. Like I said, make sure you subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. Share this episode with every pro-life advocate you know. Look into Hans, your excellent work at Vinea Research. I'm sure we'll be working together a lot more in the coming weeks and months and years. And hopefully, if your organization's looking for a well-respected research firm, that you'll look into Hans, because he and his team are amazing and just excellent to work with. So thank you all for joining me today. Thanks, Kristi, for being on. Thanks, Hans. And we'll see you all in the next episode of Explicitly Pro-Life.